You are listening to Intangiblia, the podcast of intangible law, plain talk about intellectual property. Please welcome your host, Leticia Caminero.
Hello from Washington, D.C. This is episode 7. Today we will talk with a unique creator. He's a scientist turned artist. His creations come in different mediums, and some of them are created with artificial intelligence. In the previous episode, we talked about artificial intelligence and how it revolutionizes intellectual property and the world in general. But artificial intelligence and other new technologies are not the only engines of change affecting intellectual property. Our society has been involved for quite some time now in what is known as the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is more than a technological revolution. It is also a socioeconomic revolution. Our traditional paradigms of work, interpersonal relationships, and all other aspects of our lives are changing. We do not yet know precisely where we're going, but we can recognize a direction with a more open, more connected, and more inclusive society. The way we innovate and create is also changing. Instead of only innovating in complete secrecy, we now have many open and collaboration models, such as patent pools, open access, open innovation, and open source. Likewise, innovation and creation is no longer exclusively a human endeavor. Now we have creative artificial intelligence. If you would like to learn more about the transformations to intellectual property, I invite you to read my essay, which received the first prize in the essay competition of the International Association for the Protection of Intellectual Property, AIPPI. The essay is titled Boosted by the Pandemic. Intellectual Property has a Collaboration Tool. It's available on the AIPPI website, aippi.org. Now, let's discover how our guest creates art with artificial intelligence.
Intangiblia, the podcast of intangible law, plain talk about intellectual property.
Today we have the great pleasure of talking with a multimedia artist and scientist. His work encompasses the integration of media arts with genomics, machine learning, and tango culture.
My name is Martin Calvino. I am originally from Uruguay, although I have been living in New Jersey, United States since 2006. And as a consequence of that, I am now a US citizen. I am 42 years old, and most of the time I feel like in my 20s and occasionally like in my 60s, especially after several days of non-stop hard work. I consider myself a multimedia artist, and previous to that, I was a scientist in the field of plant molecular genetics and genomics. Around 2016, I switched careers from science to art, and I have been practicing my profession as an independent artist in a full-time manner. Thus, I do not have a relationship to an academic institution or business. Nonetheless, I would like to say that I actively collaborate with scientists from universities in the US and abroad, especially in the departments of plant biology and computer science.
That's quite a change. A scientist from a very specific field of science to an artist. Tell us about your work. What do you create? What is your art?
My art practice involves several lines of artistic research and inquiry. Today I would like to discuss with you 3 of these lines. One has to do with the creation of artworks in which the visual elements composing the piece are created by a combination of genomics with computational tools borrowed from the field of bioinformatics and creative coding. So each artwork I do along this line of work is a hybrid composition between data visualization and abstract art. So you will you will see in my artworks that there is a high degree of data visualization from genomic segments derived from plants, such as rice, sorghum, and maize, and these visualizations are combined with geometric abstract elements of my own making. So you could consider that my work in this space is a kind of truly integrative of science and art. The second line of artistic research, and this is a bit more recent compared to the first one I just described, has to do with the implementation of machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithm for art making, also for the detection of political ideology and the creation of tango lyrics. So in this work, what I do is I train machine learning algorithms with different data sets that I create myself, such as data sets from images entirely derived from my artistic portfolio, data sets with tango lyrics, and data sets with news articles from newspaper. In the first case, I use machine learning to generate abstract paintings that resemble my artistic style, because the machine learns from images of my work. I later incorporate the machine output into my own physical painting, and as I repeat this process, my art co-evolves along with the machine. So I have named this procedure or artistic process coevolution, and I borrowed the name from the concept used in the fields of evolutionary biology and ecology. The other aspect of machine learning, as I mentioned it before, is that I use it to compose tango lyrics by training an algorithm to recognize word usage from about 6,000 tango lyrics. The machine output its own lyric that later I integrated into an album of electronic music with remixed tango sounds. In this album, named The Looping Thoughts, that you can search it in Bandcamp or Spotify. So what I did is I read in my own voice the output of the machine, and I integrate traditional tango sounds remixed with electronic music. Finally, and more recently, is the work I have done to detect the political leaning of 5 newspapers in Uruguay when they wrote news articles about 2 political candidates running for president, for the presidency of Uruguay last year. So in this work, I analyze word usage and composition from about 530 news articles published all during 2019, and compare these articles with the publications or the documents of governance for each political party. So when word usage is similar to one from a newspaper is similar to one political party document or the other, one could somehow somehow produce an educated guess on the political leaning on the newspaper. And I found this work interesting since there is so much going on about media manipulation of public perception, that having a rational approach to address or tackle the political leaning of a media outlet, in this case the printed press, is very important. So these 3 projects I just have described has a common ideology behind them, and this ideology is the use of technology, right? Perhaps the project sounds different from each other, but they have a unifying concept of using technology to join different interests I have. In the first project I described, I used technology to join science and art, in particular plant genomics and computational art. In the second project, I use technology to join art with politics, art with tango culture, right? And in the third project, I use technology to address the traditional aspect of my culture, which is tango, with the modernity of today's life.
Wow, your art really travels from data visualization to music to political analysis and everything in between, but always linked with technology. How is your creative process?
So my creative approach, besides using technology to showing different artistic lines of inquiry or curiosity, is that they have several phases, right? The first phase is knowledge. What do I know about what I am interested in, right? So on top of that, I build a lot of knowledge by doing a lot of research, reading a lot of papers, books, try to educate myself on the general context of what I am interested in. On top of that, I ask myself, okay, can I provide something new to this question I'm interested in addressing? Then is, okay, if I can provide something new from an artistic and scientific perspective, the next phase is, can I implement this project computationally, right? Do I have the computational tools and knowledge and skills to make it happen? After that is, do I have the artistic tools or motivation or capacity to express what I just implemented in the computer in a aesthetically pleasing manner, right? So that I can create an artwork that has a heavy research, scientific and technological component, but at the same time has a aesthetic sensibility and is something that could be considered pretty or beautiful or artistic, right? And then the last phase is, and perhaps that's the most difficult phase for me because I have trained myself as a scientist for so many years, is how do I take out my creation into the real world, right? Usually in science, you are educated or trained to spend most of the time in the laboratory, right? And occasionally you publish your work or give a talk. And then as an artist, it's a kind of solitary profession, right? You're always creating in your studio. And the last phase of my creative process is how do I take things out of the computer into the real world, How do I take all the knowledge I have generated through the artistic project that was created? How do I take it out of my studio into the street, into people? So one clear example, and perhaps the most recent one, is I use the paintings I generated using artificial intelligence, and I combine them with traditional apparel from my country of origin. So I produce a trouser who has an artistic design on it. The trouser itself is very traditional from the countryside of my country that is associated with the labor life on the countryside. And by having this piece of apparel with an artistic design created with artificial intelligence, it has a totally different look and feeling that you can use in urban settings and everyday urban life. So that's a clear example of the effort I did in pushing myself out of the laboratory, out of the studio into the real life, so that it can affect people in daily usage, right? They have a trouser or a pant they can wear, and in that object it is embedded all this previous knowledge and artistic sensibility.
It sounds like a scientific approach to creation. You have knowledge, contribution, skill, motivation, and dissemination, and all of those steps combined make a great art or music or any other creation that you are elaborating. And going to the topic of our podcast, have you had any experience with IP, with intellectual property?
I do consider intellectual property a crucial part of my creative process. Before switching to art full time, I had the opportunity to work in the startup world a short period of time. And during that time of my life, I came into contact with intellectual property landscape. I had a primer before while a graduate student in which I had to patent some of my work. And then during the entrepreneurial side of my life, I had to come into contact and implement things such as licensing agreement, trademark, copyright, and trade secrets, and again, dealing with the issue of should I patent my invention or not. So when I switched to art, I have all this previous knowledge to my service that in somehow it could guide my artistic creation when using technology, and especially when using material created by other people, because in media art is one of the techniques for creation is remixing other people's work. So I have done this it's not my main work. I just done it a little bit for my album of electronic music, and this knowledge of copyright has guided the implementation of my project in a way that I do not have to worry about infringing other people's invention. So for other artists that do not have this knowledge, it is important that they seek advice for a legal professional, so that these professional people can provide a guidance to the artist as what is the intellectual property landscape that could apply to them and their artistic process.
You sure have quite a perspective on IP, from creating as a university member to creating as an entrepreneur, and also now as an artist. So you truly have almost the full spectrum of the main IP areas that allow you to protect your work. Have you experienced anything negative regarding your work?
It has happened to me in the past that some of my digital artworks were being sold in a Romanian and Indian websites. I think it was 2 years ago. So from that moment on, I decided to not show my digital paintings full screen on my website. I just show a segment of them, and the people who are interested in knowing about them, I privately show them the piece. So this would be kind of the things that allow me to act quickly, because I have some knowledge of the intellectual property landscape.
That's why it's very important to be vigilant of your work and who is using it, for why they're using it for. You can also join collective management societies that can help you capitalize on your work and commercialize it as well. Any final thoughts for artists? Any words of wisdom?
Yes, my advice for creators, innovators that are looking to develop, protect, and commercialize their inventions is that first, have a medium to long-term outlook of your work. So are there any possible roads for commercialization? If there are, then you have to, if you know a little bit about intellectual property, you can act in advance, right? If you don't, I advise these persons to seek legal advice as soon as they can, so they can have a roadmap, right, of their work in the medium to long term prospects, so they know what to do and how to do it. Because sometimes you may think that legal advice is expensive, but if you do it on your own without the proper guidance, you are going to end up doing something wrong, or it's going to cost you more money than hiring a legal professional who will guide you to do things the correct way. So for artists, it's very important to have this understanding of licensing agreements in the case when your work wants to be used for other purpose than just hanging a piece of art on the wall, right? Like having your visual output on labels or collaborations with brand companies, and all sorts of licensing agreements in which you have to perceive a monthly or annual income out of a brand using your creations. So I would really advise artists artists to seek legal advice if they can foresee that some part of their work could have a commercialization path forward.
Thank you so much, Martin, for taking the time to answer our questions and for your advice. Have a plan for your art. And if you need it, seek advice of someone that knows about IP protection. Artificial intelligence and all these new technologies have opened a world of possibilities on creation, innovation that we are only learning to understand and learning to utilize. We have the privilege of living in historical times. Let's take the power that we have to innovate and to create, along with the collaboration potential that we have, as the fuel that we need to create a better reality where we all live in harmony. And so we come to the end of our episode. See you next Tuesday with a new guest and a new IP topic.
Thank you for listening to Intangiblia, the podcast of intangible law, plain talk about intellectual property. Did you like what we talked today? Please share with your network. Do you want to learn more about intellectual property? Subscribe now on your favorite podcast player. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Visit our website www.intangiblia.com. Copyright Leticia Caminero 2020. All rights reserved. This podcast is provided for information purposes only and should not be considered as legal advice or legal opinion.